Hey everyone, my name is Ashley Little with Wholesaling Out of the Box, and I'm joined today by Cameron Peters, Shawn Bowen, and Jacob McPherson. And today we are discussing Chapter 10 of Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. Chris was an FBI negotiator for 24 years before he retired and started the Black Swan Group to help businesses learn how to better negotiate both within their companies and externally. So without further ado, Shawn, take it away.
All right, welcome back, guys. Thanks for joining us again. We are on the final chapter for Never Split the Difference. And hopefully you guys have enjoyed this, and we're helping you through this book, and it's really helped us as a company. So let's jump right into it. This portion is talking about the Black Swans. Obviously funny, that's obviously what his name of his company is, but it deep dives into why that is. So there are three Black Swans in every negotiation. Every negotiation is new. Don't let old patterns blind you. Always ask yourself the following: why are they communicating, and what they are communicating right now? So review everything you hear. Always double check what you heard is what they intended. Let's go through this piece on this, because I don't think there's really anything to deep dive on that piece of it, but listen. Review everything you hear. Always double check that what you heard is what was intended. Use backup listeners whose only job is to listen between the lines. I think we do a really good job of that with listening to each other's conversations to help grow. Compare notes with team members to discover new information. I think that's a really good piece that we do between us as a company. Label the message behind the words. So let's talk about that little section right there for a second. Listen. How do you feel like that works around what we do, Cam, and kind of everybody from there? But like, how do you feel like that works when we're all talking about listening to the conversations that maybe help the entire learning process or conversations next time you're going to have them?
Before we do that, sorry, let's rewind a little bit, because what is a Black Swan?
What is a Black Swan is the main point of the conversation. What is it in the conversation that was a specific piece that in detail when they do it in his Audible is he's talking about and this is a little bit different, but negotiation is world, right? He did not hear the part where the person that was a robber at the bank said that he wrote a note and that he would have the police take his life, or the police will take my life prior to doing this, right? And of course, they always say that, and there was no timeline that ever got met in any negotiation. And this was the Black Swan of the conversation. If they had known this ahead of time, that they would be able to have preemptively gone ahead of time and said, we need to pay attention to this because this guy says that we're going to take him out. I think if we're going to use that in a real estate, it's specific statements. And it could be, we deal a lot with probate. We deal a lot with really hard issues, right? And immediate issues that need immediate attention, right? So tax default, you might be losing it to tax sale. Inheritance on a property, so it could be in a probate situation that it's a debt that has to be paid. And then listening to the underlying talk, right? Is it specifically to the person, or is it specifically to the number? And I think that's a good part that we can kind of go around the room and talk about that. Where do you guys feel as though you have caught that Black Swan in conversations, and what part of this resonates with you guys? That's a good point, Ashley. Let's do that. Cam, what do you think?
So listen, Linda. Listen, Linda. You gotta do it, right? So yeah, I think this part here, listening and getting that message behind the words, is, summarizing what's going on, especially if you got that assertive person that told you 5 million things and you haven't talked in a little bit, right? To be like, it sounds like there's a lot going on. You got a lot of relatives involved in the sale. You still have things you need to get out of the house. There might be some judgments that are involved right here. You might have maybe a deceased relative. You got a lot going on here. So, I mean, it seems like there's a lot going on here, and I'm just wondering, like, do you have like a clear picture of how's that's all going to unfold? How are we going to get through all this to sell this, right? Can you know what I mean? Is it fair to say, you know what I mean? Trying to uncover if there's a concern, especially if there's all those things going on. I find a lot of times that the sellers are just overwhelmed. Like they don't know much. Usually, like we say, most sellers only buy, sell a home 2-3 times in their whole lifetime, right? They don't know how that works, let alone when they've lost a relative, or if they're in a really bad financial situation, or they got all these heirs involved. They don't know. So trying to hopefully, put their mind at ease a little bit, right, on what they're dealing with, and that we can help. We've done this a lot of times, right, and we can help you through it. So I think that's the whole listening part, and then maybe summing it up and seeing if there's something else you're missing. There's always something you're missing, but hopefully I'm covering just a little bit of it.
Cool. Jacob?
Yeah, I would definitely second just about everything that Cam just said. The other thing I would say, so I won't necessarily give the example here, but really, really good example of this is, I don't know if for anybody who's listening, we do what's called the director's commentary, and it's a breakdown of a call with a seller. And specifically, a great example of this is the most recent director's commentary. I think it's DC number 4, and it's Shawn talking to his seller. And everything that Cameron just said is exactly right. So listen, and then review everything you hear, summarize, spit it back to them, and then see what comes back, right? And the director's commentary number 4 conversation that Shawn has is exactly that. For the first 7 minutes, the first half of the conversation, all Shawn is doing is listening, labeling, and summarizing, and the seller is just going back and back and back and giving more and more and more information, which ultimately allows Shawn to take that and then go and get a contract in the second half of the call. So I think that without really being able to, because I don't know that you can really give an example with the time that we have in this episode, I would just say go back and listen to that. It's going to give you exactly what I think this section is referring to. It's labeling, and it's summarizing, and it's continuing that until you have enough information where now you can take all of that and solve the issue. So
good stuff. Ashley, you feel like you use any of this in your side of the world?
Yeah. So for the listening part of it, I think I want to really stress the idea of backup listeners. And I think it's a little bit different than when he was like an FBI negotiator, literally life and death things. That's not where we are right now. So most of the time we're not listening backup live. But we use a call system. We use CallRail so that we can record all conversations. And it's pretty typical for someone to put a call in, like a screenshot in our little message, and say, hey, can someone take a listen and tell me what I did wrong, where the conversation went awry, like, is this what I think it is, that kind of thing. So very important to have those backup listeners. And I think very important both for the backup listening part and for your own training and to get better on your own is to be able to listen to your recorded calls, so that even if you were just your own backup listener, so that you go back and you're like, 6 minutes and 32 seconds, this is where I screwed up because I said this. That will help you so much next time. And then going back to the Black Swan part of it, I just wanted to give some examples of when someone saw the Black Swan and when someone didn't. So I'll start with when someone did not see the Black Swan, and this was Shawn on a deal we did like a year and a half ago now. And this woman, she was angry. We still talk about it because she called Shawn Shawnee Boy. And his assertive personality, or assertive negotiator type, which if you listen to the last episode we talked about, he did not appreciate that. And so what he was missing throughout this whole call, there were two Black Swans in this one call. And it was about, one was this tree in the front yard. And I don't remember the circumstances of it, but she was really upset because we were trying to close, and she was like, well, I'm not closing for a couple of things. One, she wanted to be able to take the tree with her. And I don't know how big the tree was, but she was like, it's been in front of this house for like 30 years. And she wanted to take it with her. And I don't know. But 2 was she was very concerned on her price number. And Shawn wasn't, he was so heated about the Shawnee Boy comment that he wasn't paying attention. I talked to him about it later, and I was like, no, she just really wanted this. I forget the exact amount, but let's say $5,000 to make it easy, which she wasn't going to get because of taxes and other things. And I'm like, no, she just really wanted this number. She is willing to walk away if she does not get this number. And so that's not recognizing the Black Swan. But recognizing it was a deal that we had with Cam this year where the seller wanted to close by a certain date. It was really important to her because she was going to donate. It was a probate situation, I think. And she was going to donate most, if not all of the funds from the sale of this house to a charity because it was the 1-year anniversary of her friend's death. And so that was really important to her to be able to close so that she could donate on that day in June, I believe it was, those funds. And he picked up on that. And that was something that we were like really, really trying to do for her. It was really important for us. I think we ran into a small title issue or a small closing issue, and it was kind of like looking a little bit iffy. And then we pulled it through. We even worked with her so that she was allowed to stay or not fully move out of the house, but was able to keep moving out of the house for an additional 2 weekends, even after she signed the closing docs. So we worked with her on the buyer for that. But I think those are 2 really good examples of why the Black Swan is important, because if you miss it, it can blow things up. Sometimes literally in Chris Voss's situation, but not in ours, thankfully. And then, but if you hear it, I mean, it can help a lot, because I think that was a good deal for us, but she felt very good about how things went with us. She felt like we helped her every step of the way and that we really treated her situation with care and respect.
Awesome.
I think that those are the differences between the wholesaler that gets the deal and the ones that don't. I really do. It's genuinely trying to uncover what that Black Swan is and then focusing on that, because that's obviously what's most important to the seller. So if you can identify that and then you can solve that, whatever that problem is, then I think that your chances of closing a deal and moving forward are infinitely greater than the guy who does not pick up on it and does not actually solve that problem. Really good examples, Ashley.
Really good. Really good. I think that's something that, I don't know about if y'all heard this or not, but everything that we talk about in this book that we use in relation to real estate is going back and caring. A 365 degree care, like you care about the entire part of it, right? It's all of it. So it's not, you care about every single piece of it. So it's, was that 360 degrees? 65, 360 degrees that you care about all of it. You actually care about the seller. And I think that each one of y'all just brought that up. That's what gets the deal, actually caring versus just caring about what you're making as a number. And that's where I go back to agree with you, Jacob, that if you actually care and it comes through and shows, then the seller is more inclined to work with you. And it could be $10,000, $15,000 less. Yep. And they still want to work with you, right? Good bring up. A really, really, really good bring up there. All right, good to move forward. Similarity principle. People trust those who are in their group. So this is the one that I talk about a lot, which is trust, like, and believe, right? If people you're working with or sellers you're working with or buyers trust, like, and believe you, that makes a massive hurdle to get past, right? Observe and mirror attitudes, ideas, and even modes of dress. I don't know about the dress part, but I agree with mirror attitudes and ideas. I don't know how the dressing would play into here, but.
Well, you're never wearing dress shoes or sneakers. You're bringing your sandals. So I mean,
every day.
Sandals.
Right. If you're judging me off the way I wear shoes, you're SOL. Maybe what type of flops you're wearing, right?
I don't know. I judge your flip flops pretty hard. So.
All right. So let's get on to the next one, which is power of hopes and dreams. Visualize what counterpart wants out of life. Use those aspirations to persuade them. Everyone wants to believe that they are capable of extraordinary. Display a passion for what your counterpart wants and convey a plan of getting them there. Changes your counterpart's perception of what's possible. We all desire a roadmap to joy. Be courageous enough to draw it, and others will follow. So just a real quick on that. How do you guys get behind this? I think this is what I was just leading into about, people like, trust, and believe in you, or trust, like, and believe you is how I always say it. But that ultimately gets people to work with you. So that does go into this believing that their counterpart's perception is possible, right? Like they're believing in us. Or the roadmap of joy, which is the final, they got done with this property. They got done with this headache. They finished this out, and this company was able to help them do that. Whereas I think one example we could use, Ashley, is the one that we had where it was like almost like an inside track where you had that deal and we were able to get him to the closing table knowing the numbers that what worked and that would actually get it to happen versus the guy that he was dealing with or the company he was dealing with that was just dragging him out forever. So let's start with you there on the talk of this power of hopes and dreams and kind of see where you feel like that maybe affects on your side of the house.
Yeah, I think by the time things get to my side of the house, people are kind of already spending their money. So whether it be that everyone has a reason for wanting to sell. Maybe it's that they just don't want to deal with the house anymore. Maybe it's that they want to take those funds and buy a van. Maybe they want to, move to where their grandkids are. Either way, or any way you put it, they're pretty much counting their money. They're ready to go. And so just making sure that you don't let them, or I don't let them lose track of those dreams. So even when the deal feels like it might fall apart, pulling it back in and, not letting $500 ruin them being able to move and go spend time with their grandkids. And yeah, because I don't know. I don't know how I feel about some of this, like about everybody wants to believe that they are capable of the extraordinary. I feel like that implies that not everyone is, and I disagree with that. I do think that everyone is capable of extraordinary things, and sometimes it's not extraordinary things that are the best things either. Sometimes just being extraordinary is living your life the way you want to live it. And that might mean going to see the grandkids, buying a van to go drive around the US in. And so I do agree with like creating that roadmap to joy and keeping that very much in the forefront of the seller's mind.
Nice. Jacob, what do you think you've done with this part?
I think this is where like, if you're truly genuine and you really care about this seller and what they're doing and what the next step is, this is where it all starts to really show and come out. I love this part of the process because for me, this is like, I would say the question that I use more often than not with a seller is what happens when all of this is behind you, right? What is the next step? What is the next phase? What is it that you want to do after you get the house sold, right? What are you going to do with the funds that come out of this, right? Or what is it that you want? So just trying to dig into like what is most important to them and then helping them get there, right? So the one that comes to mind, this was a deal where they had actually worked with another wholesaler, couldn't get the deal to close because the number was too high. I think in this particular case, the numbers were like the other wholesaler was at like 60,000, and we came in and I offered them 35,000, which was a ridiculously low number, obviously, as compared to where this other guy was at, right? But the mortgage owed on the property was somewhere along the lines of like $20,000, and they wanted to pick up and move their life down to Georgia. They wanted to get out of Virginia Beach. They wanted to start fresh, and they wanted to move on, and they wanted to get out of the area. So, and for them, their family was down in Georgia, so that's where they wanted to move. So once I discovered all of that, when it came to making my offer, it went back to framing and it went back to taking the sting out. And I was like, look, I get it. This number is super low, right? But guys, this isn't just $15,000, right? This is $15,000 to help you move on to Georgia and go down and start enjoying your new life down there, right? So kind of taking that and tying it back to what is most important to the seller. And they ultimately decided to move forward. So, which is, I mean, again, that seems crazy, right? I mean, 60,000 versus my 35, and my 35 gets the job done because I cared more about what they wanted to do and where they were going versus what the number was and, how much money I was going to make. So I think just having a genuine concern for the people that are on the other end of the deal. Like, yeah, we're benefiting from it, but at the end of the day, that's not what it's about. It's about helping somebody solve a problem. And if you don't feel that way, then quite frankly, you shouldn't be in the business. That's how I feel.
I like it. Cam.
I would literally be just changing a little bit of what Jacob said and saying the same thing. So I'm just gonna go with good one, Jacob.
I like it. All right, let's move on to the next one. Interpreting crazy behavior. Just because someone is acting.
Because.
What's that?
You forgot about because.
Oh, I did totally miss that page. Because you missed this page. People respond favorably to requests made in a reasonable tone of voice and followed by because reason, even if the reason isn't great. And I think just a short off of that, we could probably clean up all of it with just what Jacob said. Because you get behind and you explain why and how is that word's pretty powerful, actually. Did you guys want to deep dive that, or do you want to go continue off of what we had? I think we're good, right?
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think it just leads us really well into the interpreting crazy behaviors. Because I think that once you say that, if people don't respond reasonably or favorably, then you can kind of see, oh, wait, there might be these other things underlining, like an other underlying issue.
Yep, I agree. So interpreting crazy behavior, just because someone is acting crazy doesn't mean they are. More likely, they are ill-informed, which means they have incomplete or different information than you do, are constrained, may not have the power to close the deal, or have other interests, hidden interests that justify their behavior. So this is a really good one. I think this is one that you all can kind of touch on for a few seconds, but just because someone's acting crazy doesn't really mean they are. I mean, we all know everybody's got a little bit of crazy in them, right? But for what reasons? I think like the ill-informed, the constrained or other interests would be other interests. You got other people you're dealing with, right? Ill-informed, they don't know what the market's doing. They have no idea what repair costs are, right? So then they don't understand how to back in the number. Like, how are you going to offer this number when you don't even know the other numbers, right? So let's touch on that for a hot second, Jacob. Let's talk about that and give your feedback on how you feel like you go through this.
Yeah, I think that a lot of this just comes down to trying to be understanding of what the other person is saying, right? So I think of times when, and it's funny because I think of myself when I get amped up, right? So if somebody calls me and says, we've got an issue, this thing just happened, right? My first reaction is to get kind of heated because I do the whole like, oh shit, freak out, right? And then usually the next thing I do is call you or Ashley or Cam, and I'm like, guys, like we've got a problem. This needs to be solved. And you guys are historically, right? Every single time that's ever happened to me, every single one of you are like, whoa, calm down. All right, we got it. Okay, so like, tell me what's going on. Like, explain where you're coming from, why, what's happening, right? And I think that that's a really good example of you guys being the person on the other end of that, right? The receiving end, where you're sitting there and you're saying, okay, understand. All right, don't worry. We're going to come through it. We'll get it, right? Just tell me what's going on so that I can try to help. And I feel like that's what I hear and that's what I see when I think about the interpreting crazy behavior, because I know that for me, that's like, to me, that's one of those hot buttons where it's like something didn't go right that should have. All of a sudden it's a problem. I got to solve it. Usually it's, the 11th hour and it has to be solved yesterday, even though that's necessarily not always the case. But that's how my brain initially interprets the issue. And then all of a sudden I'm freaking out. And it's always you guys just coming back very genuinely saying, hey, like, okay, calm down. What's the issue? We're going to get through it. Let's figure out how we can solve it. And, and then it's just talking through it. So I think the biggest part of this is getting that other person to calm down, get them out of the hype state and bring them down to your level. And you do that by having a calm voice and just a cool, calm, collected demeanor. And that's ultimately what allows you to get to the part of the conversation where you can go into problem solving mode.
Cool. Cam.
Yeah, so here I'm reminded of an example just yesterday where it says, are they ill-informed? And I had a guy who was really adamant about, they had an old house and, the house was pretty run down on property, right? Tree fell across it. And this lot is so big, this lot's just huge. You can build so many houses on it. He's just adamant about it, right? And I know you can build 2, maybe you can build 3 on it. We've already checked with the city and yada, yada, yada. And the house isn't worth rebuilding. You just have to scrape it. Now, I know it's going to take you $8,000 to scrape that house off. But once you build on there, he just went on and on and on, right? So we walked through that whole thing. I'm like, okay, so let me take a look at this. And, he's a little bit of a hurry. Give me a call back. I'm like, all right. So I'm going to take a look at it. And yes, it's a big lot. No, it doesn't meet any sort of standards of being divided in its current zoning, right? and you look around the whole house, and I think it was in Newport News, you look around the whole house, everything is the same zoning. There's no reason why the city would rezone it to be something that would allow you to build 2 houses on here. So I gave him a call back, right? And walked him through gently because he was so adamant about, you know what I mean? That's what it was. I'm like, hey, I'm not sure where, you got the information from. You said you talked to the city, but it's a minimum of whatever it is, 6,000 square feet, and you got 5. So like, we're not going to be able to build 2 houses on here. So I'm not sure where this came from. Just, want to help you out here. But you know what I mean? If the city's going to help you out with this, and you can divide into 2, I might be able to pay what you're asking to pay. But, let's check that out, see if that's possible, right? And he was like, oh, I don't know. Well, actually, my sister told me that her friend works at the city, and she said, and I'm like, oh, so we had a chuckle. He's like, maybe she doesn't know. And I'm like, no. So I don't know. I mean, well, let me talk back with them. I was like, let me give you a call back next week. Maybe we can talk about it a little bit more. Yeah. They had to diffuse it instead of being like, hey, stupid, can't do it. Right. It ain't going to happen. So, I mean, that's where, and he was a little crazy adamant about it. And then maybe, I wouldn't say it was a black swan, but the thing was, it wasn't that they had checked with the city. They had checked with, so-and-so's friends who worked at the city. Who knows where that lady works? She probably works in some other department, right?
I know a guy that knows a lady that works somewhere else.
Yep.
Never asked a question.
Yeah.
Awesome. Ashley, do you feel like this applies over at your side at all?
Yeah, one of the biggest things that I get hit with a lot are things like closing costs, various closing costs. So one big thing that was a little bit of a learning curve for me the first time I ran into it, but now I run into it all the time and people get upset about, is what's called hazard insurance. And what that is if it's a probate case and whoever owned the house died less than a year ago, you have to get this extra insurance that ensures, like, if a mystery child pops out of the woodwork in 6 months and they say, well, no, I should have had, a third of that house or a third of that profit, that insurance will cover it. So you can pay the hazard insurance, or you can sell and hold the funds in escrow for it until that year is up. And I have sellers that bark back against me all the time about that, because they're like, no, that's a closing cost. You should be covering that. And I'm like, no, it's not a closing cost. It's a you getting your money cost. You could wait to get your money for another 6-8 months, and then no one has to pay that, or you can get it tomorrow and you can pay that. But that's not a closing cost. We don't have to have that to close unless you want your money tomorrow. So back to the ill-informed kind of thing, or even the constrained, because they feel like they need the money now. And then they get upset. But I've never seen that be more than maybe $500 or $600, which is still a lot of money, but it's not necessarily a huge thing either. I had another thought, but the mystery child thing, because we've had that happen twice. So it's not like it does not happen. But yeah, that's it.
Your family's a freak. All right. So that'll get us to the next part of this, which is to get FaceTime. It's always easier to read your counterpart and negotiate in person. And then today, when we're recording this, we're in the year of COVID, right? So we do a lot of stuff where we're on these Zoom calls or we're on these FaceTimes that we're trying to get that FaceTime. We're trying to get that interaction to be able to see these types of things. Observe unguarded moments. First few minutes before you get down to business, the last few moments as everyone is leaving, and interruptions or odd exchanges. When something doesn't make sense, there's an opportunity. Dig in. So I want you guys to go off of this, and I'm gonna come back to it because this is one that I really am big on. And I know I talk to you guys a lot about it when we start training and doing things with y'all or new people that we bring on. But Jacob, let's start with you on where you, or Cam, let's start with you, where you feel like this is something that you can speak to or you notice.
Whoops, wrong button. So yeah, I think this is one where the FaceTime is definitely important, but I try to stay on the phone as much as possible to make sure I'm not wasting my time, right, to go into person. But I will ask some specific questions to get me in person. And that's, just sort of, look, I don't want to waste your time. So I just want to make sure we're close here before we come out and take a look at this, right? Or before we talk about this more. And I guess that's the way I would do that with the getting to the in-person thing. The other thing with the interruptions, when somebody interrupts you in the middle of what you're saying, then there's something that's bothering them, or they feel that there's something that needs to be said. So when that happens once or twice, it's, hey, just go straight at the head of it and identify the interruption and be like, look, I'm not meaning to, to talk too much or dominate the conversation, right? But it seems like maybe, is there something I'm missing, something you might want to say, right? So I think that's what identifies here, or what I identify with here. Yes.
Cool. Jacob?
I'll speak to the first two bullets under observe unguarded moments. So first few minutes before you get down to business, right? So how comfortable is the seller just based on sheer body language alone before you start actually deep diving into the actual negotiation, right? Where you're going to talk about numbers and talk about the solution moving forward and whether or not you can put pen to paper. I think that it's really key to make sure that up to that point, at least, and hopefully during, that it's light, right? And that their body language is open and that they're actually ready and in a position to listen to that type of exchange and to start diving into the negotiation. If you have somebody that's closed off and so on, I think that you need to get them to open up before you start deep diving into that path. And then the other part of that, I think the biggest piece of that is that when you actually make the shift, watch the change in body language as well. Because usually when people, everything is light and it's fun and it's easy before you start going into negotiation. And then usually once you start to talk about something serious like that, their body language is going to change, right? And that's going to show you a lot as far as whether or not they are really ready to have that conversation and how it's going to be received. And then I think that the other piece of that, right, is after you've gone through all of that, you're still watching body language as you go. But the last few moments is the other big indicator, I think, as far as whether or not something is concrete and solid. So before we go, I always make it a point, usually pre-COVID, to shake hands, right? We all know that skin to skin contact is actually just something that it works, right? We want that empathy as human beings. We want to be able to secure something in a handshake, just like we always have throughout the course of history. So I think that that's really, really important. And then observing how open and, trusting they seem as you're leaving, and making sure that you guys are on the same page and so on, moving forward. Interruptions and odd exchanges, I agree with Cam. Usually if you start to go down that path, it's usually something that you have to dive into a little bit more to try to understand what's going on and why that may be happening.
Okay. Ashley, do you feel like this catches on to you at any point?
Not really. I agree with everything everyone else has said, and we've sort of talked about being in person in the last couple of chapters. I think it was in 7 and 8. So all of my thoughts are there. I just that it's harder right now, obviously, with COVID. So learning how to work around that. And I think because the world is going to change because of what's happening now. And so this in-person kind of things, it's not going to be the same thing. Even, after a vaccine or after whatever, it's not going to be the same. So learning how to pivot and how to evolve without relying too much on body language and being in person is going to be important.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to kind of wrap around after you guys came back to your talks and talk about how this is such a massive pivotal moment in time where I've always read body language, from books to videos to everything to do with that. And it's been a game changer. I make fun of it with you guys when I talk about it in our classes that we do with our people that we work with. But man, you can go sit down in a Starbucks and not say a word. You can go sit in a open market of anywhere and watch people's body language and not listen to a single word. And you can damn near read everything that's going on. And I think nowadays that's really hard, because even to the effect of the Zoom call or a online call and what it actually takes to focus on it, right? Or what it takes to be able to see, if anything, you can see what's going on, right? Like, what do you got? Waist up? If it's a conversation like this, or if it's, somebody's walking around, it's from a arm length look on their camera. So a lot of things change. And I think it's really cool. I say cool as in, I think it's really a different learning experience about to come through, right? About how you're able to pivot in a time where everything's always been hand to hand, close, face to face. And learning how to do that is going to be massively different. I look forward to it because it's something I've always had, and now I don't. I'm having to learn how to pivot to make that work, right? So y'all, I know y'all make fun of me because I'm like, hey, who's on here? Turn your camera on, right? And I'm like, can't see you, can't see what's going on, right? And it's just it's almost like a blinding problem because you can't see like you used to, right? So I wanted to come back with that and say, like, this is those times that where people are going to learn to that FaceTime does matter, but you're having to learn to pivot in a new world and new way of things to happen so that you can still do this business. And I think we've done really well with that. And for those that are listening to this recording and, hopefully maybe this doesn't change, but so much and it kind of gets back to a little bit of normal, but it's going to have a big change anyway, that you learn how to roll with it. You learn to catch the punches and keep on moving. So hopefully you guys can catch that and do it. And we'll be able to help you grow in that with some stuff that maybe we do in the future with you guys as well. But I think that does it for this chapter.
Yep. Okay, guys, thank you so much for listening to our discussion of chapter 10 of Never Split the Difference. Check us out again next week for our wrap-up discussion, putting the pieces together, where we're going to talk about what we liked, what we didn't like, and putting it all together, ironically enough. So find us at wholesalingoutofthebox.com, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.